The Simone Feiler Podcast, giving authors a platform. Welcome to the podcast.
Excited to chat with speaker, coach and author of Strong, Anna Glynn today. Anna understands what it's like to be responsible for driving engagement, wellbeing and performance in the workplace, particularly for sales teams. She's done it for over 10 years in the corporate sector, is doing it now in her own practice, and she's also written a book about it. Welcome to the podcast, Anna.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for choosing to do your Strong audiobook with me at Melbourne Audiobook Production. How was the experience and process for you?
Oh, I loved it. I want to do it again already. And even though it's only been a few weeks since the initial launch, I'm very much looking forward to the next. But it was a great process to go through. I mean, it's interesting for your first book, you learn sort of all the different stages that are involved with writing a book. It was certainly news to me that it's not just you sitting in front of your laptop writing the chapters. There's a whole lot of other components and pieces that, come after the fact. So, there's the writing, and then there's obviously the editing, and then there's, starting the actual production part, which includes both the physical book and then, of course, the audio book. But yeah, I've really, really enjoyed learning all the ins and outs of it, and know that there's so much more to learn. But it's been a great process, and obviously there's been so many people helping along the way as well, like yourself.
Oh, thank you. That's fantastic. And you decided to go the self-narration path. So I always say you should do the self-narration yourself, because guys love listening to authors. I mean, people in general narrate their own work. And secondly, it enhances your legacy. I mean, they're your words. You've studied that. You've written the book. So you should be the one to narrate it. And you did a great job.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think that was probably my childhood dream of being a newsreader coming to life, being in front of a microphone and bright lights. It was certainly a exciting time for me to do that, and made me think, maybe I should still be venturing down that path, given I found kind of a happy place being in the studio.
Oh, you never know. You never know what the future might hold, eh?
That's
But
it.
okay, Strong, how the best sales leaders engage, achieve, and thrive. It's out and available almost everywhere now, including your website, annaglynn.com.au, and not only your audiobook format, but in print and the ebook as well. So, how did it all come to you writing the book?
It was probably quite a few years ago, which led me down to, trying to understand like human behavior and what leads to people, leaders, teams, organizations, societies being at their best. And that's where I found this field called positive psychology, which is basically the study of what leads to, thriving organizations, but also all those other components as well. So I did studies in that space. I have launched a practice where I get to teach and share these messages with audiences. But really, I saw the book as just another mode of delivery. So it was another way that I could get these really important insights out into the world. So perhaps for people that, didn't get the opportunity to sit in one of my workshops or wasn't able to engage me for coaching, this is another way that they can still get these insights. What I've noticed is that with this specific field is that there is a lot of literature available, certainly a lot of academic journals and heavy, dense reports. And where I saw my role fitting in was basically translating that research into really practical, actionable strategies that sales leaders in particular could pick up and action. So it was a way of actually like bridging, I guess, the academic world with the corporate world, and me being a bit of a messenger, in the middle to get these messages out there.
It's really well written. It's very down to earth and one-on-one. So I really enjoyed listening to it. You open up the book in your introduction that sales teams are pretty much the backbone of any business or organization, but that they don't have an honorable image. And like the first thing that came to me is the salesman, the car salesman, right? They're so cliched. But how did this realization actually hit you?
I think we all get that image, and I probably still do, even though you and I are both actually in sales. Of
Yeah.
course we are. So I think that it's a very outdated stereotype, but it is certainly one that still exists when we think about sales. And a lot of professions, I work with lawyers and architects and doctors and teachers, and they will all say to me, "Oh, I'm not in sales," but they absolutely are. So I think we all need to do a bit of a reframe around like, well, what is sales? I see it more as, we're building really deep connections with other people. And as part of that, we're trying to find solutions to their problems and trying to work out ways that we can actually help them be better. And as a result of that, there is an exchange of value in some capacity. So that's where really we can all see ourselves in sales, because I think pretty much most of the people on the planet are doing that in some way, shape, or form. So we all need to embrace the idea that we are in sales, and realize that it's an incredible role that we play, that we're actually helping others, solve their challenges, but also get them to be at their best as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of like new age talk about it, sales, I guess, saying, being of service to others. So it's kind of, broadening and becoming warmer, I guess, the whole sales thing, because, yeah, like you said, ultimately it is about helping each other, isn't it? And drawing the best out of each other and, you helping someone with your skills to lift them up to be better in whatever they're selling. But how did you first get into sales?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I share this story in the book where my first recollection of being in sales is standing on the side of the road, selling the homemade goods with my best friend, trying to earn a couple of dollars. And we see all those beautiful photos often coming out on, Instagram and Facebook of kids still doing that, which I
Yeah,
absolutely love.
the
So that's
famous
my first sort
lemonade
of,
stand.
yeah, exactly. Lemonade. Or I remember selling, and I share this. We filled up jars with water and just put a lavender twig in it, and then called it perfume. Like, oh my goodness, I would love to know how many sales we actually made of that particular product.
You were creative even way back then.
Exactly, exactly. So, finding a solution to someone's problem then. But I was really fortunate. I mean, perhaps like some other people listening, I don't remember being told about sales at school. I wasn't taught it at university, but I was fortunate in that as part of my graduate position after university, I was put in the sales world. And when I got there, I was around, people and doing work that just fit. And it felt like the place where I belonged. And I couldn't believe this whole world existed out there that I didn't know about. I was never told about. It is, yeah, an incredible, it's incredible work that salespeople do. And so I was so fortunate that, yeah, I landed in that area and just continued to work there, for over a decade, and then became the leader of my sales team as well.
When you're sort of sitting in the classroom or having a conversation with your parents or friends, no one, you say it in the book, says, I want to grow up and be a salesperson. But ultimately everybody grows up and is a salesperson, isn't it?
That's it. And if only we spoke to more children or graduates or whoever it might be about this world, and how people that might be really great relationship developers, or they love being creative and innovative and solving problems and challenges. Like, what an incredible world that they could enter being sales that could actually help them play to those strengths that they bring.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously you loved it as soon as you got into it and studying it, but and then you were promoted as sales leader. How how was that for you, leading a team then?
Really difficult, to be honest, because I
Because
think
it's a completely different thing, isn't it, than
it
selling is
is.
leading.
It is, and that's it. Like, I think, there's a very different set of capabilities, from being an individual contributor to becoming a leader. And, just because you're good as a salesperson doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a great leader.
Mm,
So when I was, offered that position, I was felt so privileged. Yet I felt so uneasy about the fact that I actually had to try and drive other people's behavior. And if we know anything about humans, is that they're particularly challenging. And, I had things like I had to make sure that they were engaged. I had to make sure they were well. I had to make sure ultimately that they were performing, being in sales. That was such a big part of my KPI. So I knew how to do it for me, but obviously the question was then, how do I do it for others? And that's what really led me down the path of, exploring, other fields and areas of study going, well, if organizations have existed for centuries, surely someone has figured out the answers to a lot of the questions I had at the time. And that was where I was fortunate to do that digging and actually to work out what, some of those strategies I needed to adopt with my team.
Why do you think it's important for, other salespeople to have a leader?
Well, I mean, leaders are one of the biggest, or they have the biggest impact on the individuals in their team. So outside of, the academia, when I ask and have interviewed other people, like, who's your idol? Like, who do you look up to? Who did you learn from the most? Most people, if not all, will definitely talk about a leader that they've had in the past, whether it's a direct manager or someone else that they've been, fortunate to be exposed to. It makes sense because they've seen these people perhaps doing the role on the job, and they've had that opportunity to observe them and role shadow and pick up the little nuances that maybe people don't realize have a really big impact, but they're probably part of the reason why they do, or are so successful in their roles. So leaders play such a huge part in setting their teams up for success. So motivating them, making sure they're playing to their strengths, creating environments where people are connected, they're driven, they're clear on what it is they need to achieve, they find meaning in their role, they grow and develop. Like, there's a whole lot of things that actually leaders need to do to create the cultures that actually set people up for success. So they play a huge role.
Yeah. From your perspective, obviously technology and things are moving really quickly nowadays. How's the sales environment changed, say, over the last 10 years?
I think it depends on what industry, but certainly we know that there's been, a whole lot of technology advancements. And I think there's a lot of positive that has come from that, certainly, and first and foremost. Of course, people are always going to be apprehensive about, technology advances and robots going to take over my role and that sort of thing. There's a lot of fear out there. But I think we really need to see technology as a positive and think about, how can it actually support me in my job? Like, is it going to make me more efficient in some way or make it easier for me to do my job? There will always be a space for human interaction. And again, I think if we explore a world like sales, given it is so based on relationships and building trust and having, deep connections and really understanding the person you're working with and what their needs and opportunities are, I would hope that a robot wouldn't be able to replace that. I hope that there'll always be a need for those sorts of interactions so that the world of sales will continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, like, given the current environment with the cost of living and the housing crisis, never mind the wars and everything else that's going on the planet, that sales teams are finding it particularly hard at the moment?
Yeah. It's hard across the board. So for all those reasons you mentioned, these are the pressures that sales team are feeling. And like what we spoke about earlier, they are the backbone of organizations. So if the sales teams aren't hitting their KPIs, then that's going to have a direct impact on almost the organization's survival rate, because they have to be selling to be able to, sustain themselves in the future. So the pressure is being felt certainly professionally, but then also that sort of pressure that salespeople hold also can be felt at home, because ultimately often their salaries and their commission structures is actually helping, contribute to their family life as well.
Absolutely.
So there can be a lot of pressure if they're not delivering or meeting their budgets. That's going to have those flow-on effects, obviously, to their personal lives as well. So it's been felt, and I'm not sure whether it's ever, been as intense as it is currently.
Yeah, it does feel really intense. So I guess, I mean, given that, what makes a really good salesperson in a time like this, like what are their strengths?
Well, I think some of the strategies that salespeople, need as a fundamental is, knowing how they actually cope well with challenges. So how they're able to overcome the hurdles that they might face in their roles, particularly things like the knockbacks and the setbacks, because they are so common to salespeople, more so than other people in organizations. Similar to that, it's also about handling that pressure that we just spoke about. So do they have the strategies to be able to cope well with the pressure? And that's not about avoiding it. It's actually about knowing, well, what are the best ways that you can deal with it as well? So that sort of resilience piece is absolutely a fundamental that every salesperson needs to have, and to be learning and to being intentional about sort of strengthening that muscle as well. I think then the second piece of it is, handling the pressure, coping well with the struggle, but then it's also how do you get to be at your best in spite of it? So how do you still ensure that you're at your 8, 9, 10 out of 10, despite the challenges that exist? Because they're not going away. So we need to make sure that we're still able to thrive in spite of them as well.
Mm. And as your role as a leader for salespeople, how would you then facilitate those salespeople to, be able to be on top of their game at this time?
Well, I think it comes down to the mindset and the tool set that you have. So a lot of the focus with sales teams is often on the skills that we need to sell. So you're influencing, your persuasion, your closing, your building pipeline, prospecting, like you name it. There's a whole long list of those kind of technical skills that you need to be good in your sales role. But exactly as we just spoke about, those skills won't help you overcome your challenges necessarily, and they won't necessarily help you to thrive either. So that's where there needs to be more focus given to, well, what's the mindset that helps us in sales, and what's the tool set that we need? So I call these the off-field factors. So these are the things that you're kind of doing behind the scenes that help you to be at your best when you're on field. So it's a sporting analogy that I use that I think still speaks volumes in the
Definitely.
sales world.
And in your
So when
book.
yeah, exactly. So when we talk about mindset, what's really interesting, and it makes a lot of sense, is that optimists tend to do better in sales as opposed to their pessimistic counterparts. So how do we adopt that optimistic mindset? Relates a lot to, firstly, well, what's the way that we think? Is it that we see challenges, but we see them as opportunities, perhaps to grow or develop in some way? Are we really proactive in the face of challenges and try and find solutions to our problems, as opposed to just like sitting back and letting things, overwhelm us?
Yeah.
Do we focus on what we can control versus what we can't? Are we grateful? Do we use humor? These are a lot of the traits that optimists have that actually means they're able to achieve far greater outcomes than pessimists in sales.
Yeah.
There is absolutely a time and a place for pessimism. So that's kind of the mindset piece. And then when I look at like the tool set that salespeople need, this is a lot around relationships. It's a lot around, your internal resources, like using your strengths. It's a lot about how do you motivate yourself as well. So these elements, the tool sets and the mindsets, are absolutely going to help you go further as opposed to just sales skills.
Great answer. Obviously, there is a lot more good stuff like that in Anna Glynn's Strong. The new audiobook is freshly out. So what would you say to people listening are your strongest recommendations that people listen to the book, Anna?
Well, I think it's just about, shifting that focus and realizing that, perhaps we are missing teaching our teams and focusing on these particular elements, these off-field factors that really are going to differentiate our teams, transform them, and actually give them that competitive edge. I also say that we're going to get better salespeople, but based on what I'm sharing, you're actually going to get better humans too as well, because we're setting people up to thrive professionally, but also a lot of these things actually help us personally.
Wonderful. Awesome. So reasons there to listen to Strong by Anna Glynn, and the print and the ebook are also out. But you were in the corporate world of sales for about 10 years, but then you went on to start your own business. So how did that all happen?
Well, during my study, I realized that what I was learning was very much what organizations needed to hear. Now, at the time, a role didn't really exist within corporates. It might today, I'm not sure, that actually supports leaders and teams in this space. So I made the decision that I needed to go and launch my own practice so I could share more of these insights with more organizations because it really is what worked. So that was what led me to launch my own practice, where I have the privilege of, speaking, teaching, coaching people on all these different elements, and with the whole goal to actually help them, move closer towards thriving.
Yeah. How long have you been operating?
4 years.
Oh,
So 4
awesome.
years of running, my own practice, and certainly something that's going to stick around for a long time.
Yeah. So you obviously like being your own boss.
I'm
What's
a
the
very
best thing
hard
about
boss.
it? That's the way to
I
succeed in business, isn't it? Being hard on
Yes, I'm
yourself,
a
right?
very hard boss on my employee, being employee number one. So yeah, my boss is a hard worker, very passionate, very committed to the cause, wants to, just try and create these positive changes, throughout the world. So that's really a big driver.
Awesome. So what sort of businesses have you worked with?
Well, predominantly working across, the financial services industry where I've come from, a lot of other professional services firms as well. But then I also work with not-for-profits, people in the healthcare and education space, and even in hospitality as well. Can't also forget my legal friends. So I do a lot of work with lawyers as well. So there's really, I guess the strategies are applicable to anyone. So really, I have the opportunity to work with anyone that has, needs to learn some of this material. Uh, I'm also very flexible in the way that I work, being, a practice. I'm able to tailor and cater what I offer based on what the client needs and wants at the time as well.
And why do you reckon people should choose you over going to someone else that does the same sort of thing?
Oh gosh,
Here we go.
I don't know
Here
if
we
I've
go.
ever been asked that.
This is the hardcore sales question.
It is, it is. Well, I suppose, from my perspective, everything that I talk about has been backed up by evidence. So you're never going to hear something come out of my mouth that is false or can't be substantiated by a journal article that exists somewhere. So I think that's the first thing. The second part is that I've often walked in people's shoes. So if they are a leader or if they're a sales individual or they've been in the corporate sector, like I know your language, I know your challenges, I've been there. So I
Mm.
think that's the other element that people particularly like. And I think, there is, this, I guess, bit of spark or energy that I bring that I really want. I deeply believe in bringing out the best in people. I'm incredibly passionate about it. It's what fulfills me and gets me out of bed. And so I think people can feel that when they work with me as well.
Yeah, you're definitely very vibrant, and yeah, you can tell, you can hear the passion in your book and, in the words, and even just speaking to you now. Yeah, it's enlightening and inspiring for anyone listening or watching, I'm sure, to give you a call if they're looking to better their sales teams or talk about leadership. But you're also a speaker. So what does that involve?
Well, again, this is just another mode that I get to deliver these messages. So
Mm.
it might be at an internal conference or an industry event or something of the like, where I get the opportunity to stand up and again share these insights and messages with audiences. So I really just see it in addition to the book, in addition to training in classrooms and workshops or coaching, one-on-one or group capacities, the keynotes are just that other opportunity to share.
Yeah. And so what kind of stuff do you do in your coaching and leadership courses? Like, obviously we know the content, but do you, what kind of, yeah, how do they operate your workshops?
Well, again, they predominantly focus on whatever the needs are of the groups that I'm working with. So, any new client that I'm engaging with, I'm trying to understand, first and foremost, like what are their challenges, what are their needs, what is it that they really need. So you're not going to get kind of an off-the-shelf solution when you're working with me. I always say to people, I've got lots of different ingredients in the pantry, and I'll pull out what is needed at the time and offer it to you. So in terms of then I shape out workshops and training programs based on those needs. So it might be, for instance, I've got a group who really need to work on their purpose and providing that meaning to their teams. They're in customer service and hospitality, and they really want to try and ensure that every person, whether it's the cook, the bartender, up into the CFO, understands what their role is in delivering the purpose of the organization. So we're doing a lot of work in that particular space. For others, it might be working more on that mindset piece. So how do we become more optimistic? And we build out workshops around what that might look like for them as well.
Yeah, that sounds sensational. Obviously, you have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, I make it fun because that's the best part of training. And, if I've learned anything from the studies is we need to be in a much more positive state from a mindset perspective to be better learners and to grow and develop. So it would be very remiss of me not to have fun and energy in training sessions if I want people to be actually learning and developing, because if you're in a negative state, you're not going to get those same outcomes. So we do have lots of fun.
Awesome. So Strong, How the Best Sales Leaders Engage, Achieve and Thrive, the audiobook, the ebook and the printed book, all available now. Where can people find out more about you, Anna?
Well, first and foremost, I'd love people to go to my website, which is annaglynn.com.au. There is lots of information there, including links, obviously, to the book. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, so I'd love people to connect where I'm regularly sharing sort of tips and tricks along the way as well. But more so than that, I always love having conversations with people. So if anyone wants to reach out and have a chat or exchange a message, I'm always very forthcoming about talking about my favorite topic, which is all of this space.
And you're really good at it. It's been so enlightening chatting with you today and, of course, working with you, creating your audiobook. You're awesome. And I've no doubt anyone that's working with you is going to boost up their KPIs and develop better leadership qualities and skills by working with you, Anna. So thank you for joining my podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for joining the Simone Feiler Podcast. What's your story? Contact Simone for a chat at brisbaneaudiobookproduction.com.